Good afternoon, everybody. It's my pleasure to be present here at MRSI's 33rd annual seminar, representing not just thelighbuld.ai, but also our collaborative partners, TVS Motors. Today, we're talking about blending emotion AI and human insight. And this is a mixed method study, which is about consumer decision-making in the Indian automobile industry. Quite a confluence of different factors coming together. What I'd love to do before I start is, unfortunately, the TVS Motors team couldn't be here today with us, but I want to thank them for their guidance and inspiration. They're the reason we are here today, so a big shout out to them. Very quickly, a method to the madness, or the power of and, all of these come together in the study that we are presenting to you today about how we blended the power of emotion AI with the context and empathy of human insight. The challenge really was to understand the modern scooter buyer in the changing scenario of the Indian automobile landscape. The research question really was that how can we use emotion as an anchor and link it to articulated verbiage of the qualitative research process to understand motivations deeper, to understand where particular motivations stem from, which emotions are they rooted in, and therefore how intense are they. This is a sector that's rapidly changing. Consumer preferences, reliance on tech, novelty, aspiration, all of these come together, and all of these are essentially rooted in human emotion. Traditional methods depend on articulated techniques and are slow and time-consuming. So what did we do? We could have gone with the OR approach, which was AI tech, scale it up, deliver fast results, or human insight. Traditional, sure, but it takes time. AI technologies enable scale, they enable speed, and they enable no human bias, objectivity. But human context is what provides empathy, it provides validation, it helps you to root that decision in actual human behavior. We decided with the power of and. The and approach links the speed of AI with the empathy and context of human insight. The research design reflected this hybridized methodology. We used human manual methods supplemented by AI techniques to gather raw data. We used AI technologies, including generative AI, conversation analytics, and facial coding to process that data at hyper speed. We had human overview, bringing context, validation, and most importantly, empathy and human understanding to the analysis of that data. We combined various methodologies that eventually led to actionable insights. Now, if you break it down into the actual methodology itself, all of them had human and AI components. I'd like to pause here for a second because one of the recurring themes that I have been hearing as I interacted with clients and with my research fellow partners in the last few days has been, we have to switch to AI. But that is a question that's extremely extreme as a viewpoint. There is no switch required, which is what this study really proves. It's a hybridized approach where we collectively do what cannot be done by one party. And that is also shown in the methods that we've employed here. The data collection, there was human execution in terms of the gathering of data, but the processing of data was sped up by AI. In the analysis, the contextualization, the empathy, the rooting, the probing, the nuancing was done by the humans. But the thematic analysis of transcripts, coding the emotion AI, linking it all together was done by AI. In terms of data interpretation, the generation of those personas from the vast amounts of unstructured data was done by AI. But the actionable recommendations that are rooted in an understanding of the market were done by humans. The AI layer today has become sophisticated enough to be an able partner to the human researcher. However, it requires a little bit of help, and that's why I will shamelessly do a little sales plug here, because most conventional AI tools can't handle the volumes of qualitative data that are required to make decisions. The systems that we have built allow you to do million token contextualization. That's a bit of a mouthful, but it allows you to process the equivalent of one novel of data at one shot. And that is something that takes human beings literally weeks to do. It also auto-generates thematics, verbatims, summaries, contextualizations with zero human intervention, It allows human beings to play with the data, interact with it, brainstorm with it, and therefore come up with tangential ideas which they could not have come up with on their own. And it frees humans up to do what they do best: tell stories that make sense, develop strategies that appeal to other human beings, not sift through reams and reams of data with no productivity. The AI offering also, because it's devoid of human error, is quite highly accurate with guardrails. It allows you to develop emotion maps, do facial expression analysis, extract clips, verbatims, all at the click of a button with no human intervention. Here we can actually cluster the data from the human piece and then extract personas from them. So you can look at vast volumes of data, look at trends and patterns, which is what AI is brilliant at doing, because that's where humans sometimes tend to miss the plot, but keep it open for human validation and understanding. So eventually what we ended up with after a very quick qualitative study that was very large in scale was very defined and clustered human personas that were substantiated by emotion behavior, by verbatims, by demographics, by usership, all of the cuts clustered and made sense. So eventually, the recommendations were quite straightforward and simple, but rooted in deep human understanding of the drivers of this particular industry. Technology was to be positioned not just as aspirational, but reliable. Mileage concerns were not to be dismissed because they are the basis of purchase behavior in the automobile segment, but it was to be tackled head-on. Cultivation of a community to build the aspirational goal and the experience of owning an automobile or a scooter in a particular segment was something that needed to be deeply invested in from a brand perspective. Reinforcing trust in service, doubts, loyalty, all of these are addressed by service concerns. These needed to be addressed because these were an area of a gap. Amplifying the core strengths of the brand, which were rooted in aspirational technology, by making it a reliable technology provider that you could depend on, needed to be reiterated in all of the communication, whether in positioning, advertising, or customer touchpoints. The future of research, we strongly believe, is hybrid. It never is an either or an or. We believe it really exemplifies the and, because technology can provide the scale and the objectivity needed for you to get your decisions to market in the short time frames that you operate in. But human insight is critical and irreplaceable when it comes to providing context and, most importantly, empathy. If you do not understand and empathize with your user, which technology, by the way, cannot do, then you cannot build on insights that make your products and services appeal to them. So with that, I'd like to thank you for your kind attention, and once again, thank the TVS team for their support in making this possible.
We do have a couple of questions for you. The first question we received was, where did AI emotion mapping conflict with human interpretation the most?
I think that's a lovely question, and yes, it did happen. There are multiple situations where the human emotion mapping that was done by the AI systems highlighted particular behavior patterns or facial expressions that went against what the human moderator or the human researcher concluded as an objective. Instead of this providing a conflict, it actually provides an opportunity for deeper introspection. If a human researcher with his intuitiveness and hours of learning and experience concludes that, say, a person is not impressed by the suite of features that was offered by the automotive provider, but the system is telling you that there is a sense of continued joy and happiness that he is displaying while talking about your product, there is an opportunity there to delve deeper into the nuances. Is the stated response driven by the way that you are questioning them? Are you leading a consumer to say what you want him to hear? Is the facial expression actually determinant of his mindset? All of these are questions that come up and must be addressed during the research process. There is never a single answer. But what it does give the researcher and the business teams an opportunity to do is not take things at face value. And at the end of the day, isn't that the purpose of research?
There's a follow-up question, of course. How would you sort of layer these emotions and how would you compile that with AI, what AI gives? Because there is a mention of how AI cannot get into the emotional context part of it. But if you had to layer both of it, then how would you do that?
Again, lovely question. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to explain. I think we very often simplify facial emotion coding. When we started work in this space, we did too. It's a common problem. We believe that a human expression must correspond to the expression, emotion, congruence. That's not necessarily true. I may be articulate, smiling, confident, poised. I may be a nervous, shivering wreck on the inside. Contextualization of emotion and display of expression all have to be taken in context. Is the person in a CLT, out of his depth, surrounded by a focus group where he's being outshouted? Is he sitting in the comfort of his home, surrounded by his family, on a video call, in a space of comfort and expressing opinions? Is his stated response matching what his expressions are displaying at that point of time? Is there a clear contradiction between the two? I think what very often happens with facial emotion coding data is we take the expression as king. What is king is the emotion and the mindset that generates that expression, and it takes experience to look beyond that. I'm sorry that was a slightly vague answer, but that was a very tough question, so thank you for it.
One final question for you.
Yes, please.
What are the best practices for researchers to validate and sense check data outputs from AI? Example, let's say thematic analysis.
This is actually a question that really needs a session on its own. The very first thing that is a best practice is to experiment with technology. You cannot expect to get your choice of technology or technology partner right at the first shot. So for every researcher or brand person sitting here today, I would encourage you to engage with your technology partners, do mock studies, look at the data and see whether it closely resembles the output that you have spent weeks generating. And if there are discrepancies or differences, what gives rise to these? Again, a very tough question to answer in a short period of time, but it's extremely important to depend on authentic, committed field partners, because unless the data is collected in a correct, accurate, detailed manner, it's always a garbage in, garbage out. So we've seen with any kind of AI data, unless the data going in is of high quality, the output will be rubbish. And that is something that traditional research kind of works around. It massages a lot of the incorrect, inaccurate, frankly low quality data sometimes to provide reasonable outputs. Whereas that's a great jugadu practice that I must applaud, I don't think that's the spirit in which research should be conducted, but again, that's just me.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for your time.